Graham spent months telling our parents that his fiancée was brilliant but exhausting. A Pulitzer-track journalist who was simply too accomplished for her own good. He framed her success like an affliction he was noble enough to tolerate. I stayed quiet, just like I had for 32 years. But when Celeste finally sat down across from me with her voice recorder running, I realized she wasn't the problem Graham described, she was the solution he never saw coming. The conference room smelled like dry erase markers and aggressively brewed coffee. On the screen, the slide deck for our Q3 investor update glowed with a shade of blue that marketing called trust, but which I privately referred to as panic. "Make it simpler," the vice president of growth said, leaning back in his ergonomic chair. He waved a hand at the architecture diagram I had spent 3 days refining. "It is too dense. Lydia, investors do not want to know how the sausage is made. They just want to know it tastes like 100% growth." I looked at the diagram. It represented the complex data piping that kept our fintech platform from accidentally laundering money or collapsing under high traffic. Removing the complexity would not make it simpler. It would make it a lie. "If we remove the compliance layer from this visual," I said, keeping my voice level, "we are suggesting our transaction speed is instantaneous without verification. That is not just a simplification. It is a regulatory red flag." The vice president sighed, the sound of a man burdened by someone else's integrity. "Lydia," he said, dragging out the vowels of my name, "we are selling the vision. The vision is speed. The engineering team can worry about the brakes later. Just give us a slide that says we are the fastest in the market. Can you do that?" I looked at him. I looked at the product manager who was busy staring at her phone to avoid making eye contact. I had been a senior product strategist at Aris Financial for 4 years. In that time, I had learned that my job was less about strategy and more about translation. I translated the chaotic, impossible demands of leadership into actionable, safe roadmaps for engineers, and then I translated the engineers' realistic constraints back into palatable, simplified updates for leadership. I was the shock absorber. "I can make the box smaller," I said finally, "but I'm keeping the compliance node." "Great," he said, already standing up. "Love the collaboration." I walked back to my desk with a headache thrumming behind my eyes. This was my life fighting small, invisible wars to keep reality in the room. While everyone else tried to push it out the window, I sat down and opened my laptop, ready to dismantle my diagram. When my phone buzzed against the hard surface of the desk, it was the family group chat. My mother had sent a string of party popper emojis, followed by a photo of a bottle of champagne. "Graham is coming this weekend," the text read, "and he is bringing Celeste. Engagement dinner Saturday night. Everyone clear your schedules." I stared at the screen. My brother Graham, the golden boy of Harbor City, he had been engaged for 3 months to Celeste Halden, a woman I had never met but knew everything about because Graham made sure we knew. She was an investigative journalist for a major paper, the kind of writer who took down corrupt city council members and exposed supply chain fraud. Graham called her his power match. My parents called her the icing on the cake of Graham's already spectacular life. My father chimed in next. "Big weekend. Lydia, you can make it. Right? No late nights at the office," I typed back. "I will be there." "Good," my mother replied. "Wear something nice. Graham says Celeste is bringing wine from a vineyard in France she interviewed the owner of. Let us try to keep up." I put the phone face down. I looked back at my compliance node on the screen. It was going to be a long weekend. The drive to my parents' house in the suburbs took 45 minutes. Enough time for the skyline of Harbor City to dissolve into manicured lawns and driveways wide enough for 3 cars. I parked my modest sedan behind my father's SUV and saw a sleek silver sports car already in the driveway. Graham. I checked my reflection in the rearview mirror. I looked like what I was, a 32-year-old woman who had spent 60 hours that week staring at spreadsheets and arguing about API latency. I applied a fresh coat of lipstick, took a breath, and got out of the car. The house was warm, smelling of roasting rosemary and expensive candles. My mother greeted me at the door with a hug that was tight, but brief, her eyes already darting over my shoulder to see if I had brought anything. "You look tired." "Lydia," she said, smoothing my collar. "Are you still happy at that job? It seems like it takes so much out of you." "I am fine. Mom," I said, "the job is good. We are launching a new vertical next week." "That is nice," she said, in the tone she used when I told her I had bought new windshield wipers. She did not ask what a vertical was. She pivoted, her face lighting up. "Come in. Come in." They are in the living room. Graham is telling us about the engagement party venue. I followed her into the high-ceilinged living room. Graham was standing by the fireplace, one hand in his pocket, the other holding a crystal tumbler of scotch. He looked, as always, like he was posing for a magazine cover tall, jawline sharp enough to cut glass, wearing a cashmere sweater that probably cost more than my first car. Sitting on the sofa was a woman who could only be Celeste. She was striking, but not in the way I expected. I had anticipated someone loud, someone who took up space. Celeste was still. She had dark hair pulled back in a severe, elegant knot, and she wore a charcoal blazer over a silk camisole. She was listening to Graham. Her head tilted slightly, her eyes dark and unreadable. Lydia, Graham boomed, spotting me. He crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled me into a hug that smelled of cedar and confidence. The prodigal sister returns from the salt mines. "Hi, Graham," I said, patting his back. "Good to see you." He pulled back, holding me at arm's length. "You know Celeste, right? Well, you know of her, finally, in the flesh." Celeste stood up. She was taller than me. She extended a hand, and her grip was firm, cool, and dry. "It is so good to finally meet you." "Lydia," she said. Her voice was low, textured, distinct. "Graham talks about you constantly." "I bet he does," I said, forcing a smile. "Usually about how much I work." Celeste's eyes flickered with something amusement recognition, but Graham laughed over it. "Hey, someone has to keep the global economy running while the rest of us are dreaming." "Right," Graham said, wrapping an arm around Celeste's shoulders. He pulled her slightly off balance, just an inch, but I saw her adjust her footing to compensate. We sat down. The dynamic established itself immediately. Graham was the broadcaster. We were the audience. He launched into a story about a negotiation he had closed earlier that week, framing it as a battle of wits where he, naturally, had outsmarted a room full of seasoned veterans. My father listened with rapt attention. "That is incredible. Son," he said, "you have always had that instinct, that killer instinct." Graham winked at Celeste. "I try to tell Celeste here that business is just war by other means, but she thinks it is all about ethics." "I did not say that," Celeste said, taking a sip of her wine. "I said that sustainable business requires transparency. There is a difference." Graham squeezed her shoulder again. "See intense." He looked at my parents. She reads SEC filings for fun. I wake up at 2 a.m. and she is there in the dark with her iPad, highlighting footnotes. I tell her, "Babe, nobody cares about the footnotes. That is why they are footnotes." My mother laughed, a nervous, delighted titter. "Oh, Celeste, you must be so smart. I do not know how you keep all that in your head." "It is my job," Celeste said. She did not smile. Dinner was served in the formal dining room. My mother had made a roast, and my father poured the red wine Celeste had brought. "So, Lydia," my father said, cutting into his beef, "Mom says you are doing a launch. Is that a big deal?" "It is, actually," I said. "We are rolling out a new peer-to-peer lending feature. It uses a new algorithm to assess risk for underbanked populations." "It is," Graham interrupted, holding his fork like a baton. "It is basically an app update. Right? Like when Instagram changes the button layout." "Not exactly," I said, feeling the familiar heat rise in my neck. "It involves a complete restructuring of our back-end data architecture." Celeste looked up from her plate. She looked directly at me. "Are you handling the risk logic internally? Or are you partnering with a third-party vendor?" she asked. The table went quiet. It was a specific, technical question. My parents looked confused. Graham looked annoyed. We are building it internally. I said, surprised. We did not want to rely on black box scoring models. We wanted to be able to audit the decisions ourselves. That is rare. Celeste said, most fintechs just plug into a legacy bureau and slap a new interface on it. Building your own ledger for risk assessment is a heavy lift. How are you handling the bias testing? I felt a spark of something I had not felt in a long time at this table, genuine engagement. We are running shadow models right now, I said, leaning forward. We are comparing our output against traditional FICO scores to see where the divergence happens. The hardest part is convincing the investors that a slower rollout is safer. Right, Celeste said, because the temptation is to scale the user base before the model is proven. Exactly, I said. Graham cleared his throat. Loudly. Okay, nerds, he said, flashing a blinding smile. Let us not bore Mom and Dad with the tech support talk. Celeste, honey, you are doing it again, doing what Celeste asked, not looking at him, interrogating the civilians, Graham said. He reached over and covered her hand with his. Celeste has this habit of turning every conversation into a deposition. She forgets that normal people just want to eat dinner, not solve the world's problems. I am not bored, I started to say, but Graham was already pivoting. Speaking of solving problems, Dad, did I tell you about the contractor for the new house total nightmare? But I handled it. He launched into another story. I watched Celeste. She did not pull her hand away from his, but she did not turn her palm up to meet it, either. She just let her hand sit there, trapped under his, while she took another bite of the roast. She looked at me once more, a quick, sharp glance, and gave a tiny nod. It felt like a secret handshake. The rest of the dinner followed the script. Graham directed the conversation like a conductor when my mother asked Celeste about her wedding dress. Celeste started to describe a vintage designer she liked. Graham cut in. We are thinking custom, he said. Something structural. Celeste tends to hide in baggy clothes. So we need something that shows off the fact that she is actually a knockout. We need to make sure she does not look like she is going to a library. My mother nodded enthusiastically. Oh yes, you have such a lovely figure. Celeste, you should flaunt it. Celeste took a long sip of wine. I prefer clean lines, she said quietly. She is just modest, Graham said to the table. She does not know how to own the room yet, but she is learning. I am teaching her. I stared at my plate. I felt a sick feeling in my stomach, a mixture of anger and familiarity. I knew this tone. It was the same tone he used when we were children, when he would explain to our friends that I was shy, not quiet, or that I was practicing, not playing. He defined the world for everyone around him. And eventually, the world just agreed with him because it was easier than fighting the sheer force of his certainty. After dinner, we moved to the patio for coffee. The evening air was cool. My father was showing Graham the new grill. I went back into the kitchen to help my mother with the dessert plates. Lydia, be a dear and check if Graham wants decaf or regular. My mother said. I walked toward the patio door. The screen door was open just a crack. I could hear Graham's voice, low and confidential. I stopped. He wasn't talking to Dad. He was talking to Mom, who had apparently slipped out while I was stacking plates. She is wonderful. Graham, my mother was saying. But she is very serious, isn't she? Graham laughed. A soft, exhaling sound. She is a lot. Mom, I know. She has this need to be the smartest person in the room. It is a defense mechanism. It seems exhausting. My mother said. It can be, Graham said. But she is brilliant. And frankly, she needs someone like me to ground her. She lives in her head. I'm going to calm her down once we are married. Get her off this investigative hamster wheel. She just needs a little direction. I stood frozen in the hallway. I'm going to calm her down. He said it with such casual benevolence, as if he were talking about training a high-strung dog. And what about Lydia, my mother asked. She seemed chatty tonight. Graham chuckled. Lydia is Lydia. She likes that Celeste speaks her boring language. It is cute. I think Lydia feels validated that someone successful cares about her little computer projects. I stepped back, away from the door. My heart was hammering against my ribs. Little computer projects, boring language. I turned around and walked loudly back into the kitchen, making sure my heels clicked on the tile. "Coffee is ready," I called out, my voice sounding tinny and fake to my own ears. When they came back in, Graham kissed me on the top of the head. "Great dinner." "Lids," he said. "You are looking healthy." "Thanks, Graham," I said. I looked at Celeste. She was standing by the doorway, watching him. Her face was perfectly composed, but her eyes were dark, deep pools of intelligence that Graham was seemingly too busy admiring himself to notice. I did not sleep well that night. I drove back to the city at midnight, claiming I had an early meeting. My apartment was quiet, a relief after the performative noise of the suburbs. I woke up Sunday morning at 7. I made coffee and opened my laptop, dreading the week ahead. I had 40 unread emails. One of them stood out. It was not from a colleague. It was not from a recruiter. Subject inquiry / feature series / Eris Financial. From Celeste Halden Chalden at business-standard.com. I stared at the name. I hovered my cursor over it. I clicked, "Dear Lydia, I hope this email finds you well. It was a pleasure meeting you last night. Although I wish we had been able to speak more freely, I am writing to you in my professional capacity. I am currently curating a profile series for Business Standard, focusing on the new ethics of fintech. The series highlights leaders under 35 who are building sustainable, transparent financial architecture in an industry often criticized for the opposite. Based on our brief conversation regarding your work on the internal risk logic at Eris, I believe your perspective would be invaluable. I would like to formally request an interview with you and your product team to discuss the challenges of building audit-first systems in a growth-focused market. This is not a fluff piece. I am interested in the friction between engineering reality and investor expectations. I have attached a preliminary list of questions to give you a sense of the scope. Please let me know if you would be open to this. I can work around your schedule. Best. Celeste Halden. I sat back in my chair, a feature series. Business Standard was huge. It was the kind of publication that made careers. I scrolled down to the attachment, preliminary questions. In Q2 of last year, Eris shifted its user acquisition strategy from credit prime to subprime targeting. How did the product team adjust the risk algorithm to prevent predatory lending practices? You personally advocated for a delay in the instant approval feature. What specific data points were you seeing that leadership was not? How do you reconcile the CEO's public statement about zero-friction onboarding with the necessary friction of KYC, Know Your Customer compliance? I stopped reading. My mouth was dry. These were not polite questions. These were not the questions of a future sister-in-law doing a favor. These were the questions of someone who had already dug through the public filings, the archived press releases, and perhaps even some leaked internal memos. She knew about the delay in instant approval. That had never been public. How did she know that I stood up and walked to the window, down on the street? The city was waking up. Graham thought Celeste was a project. He thought she was a trophy he could polish and put on a shelf. He thought she was intense, but manageable. He was wrong. I looked back at the screen. The questions were dangerous. If I answered them honestly, I could get fired. If I didn't answer them, someone else might, and they might lie. But there was something else, too. Under the fear, there was a spark, a hot, bright ember of pride. She listened, at dinner, while Graham was talking over me, while my parents were nodding along to his monologue. Celeste had been listening. She had heard the technical nuances I was trying to convey. She had recognized the competence I had spent years trying to prove to my family. Graham said she was too accomplished. He said he would calm her down. I sat back down at the computer. I looked at the cursor blinking at the top of the reply box. If I did this, I was stepping out of the shadow. I was inviting a spotlight that could burn everything down: my job, my family's fragile peace, Graham's ego. I typed, "Dear Celeste." I paused. I am available. Tuesday morning. I typed, Let's talk. I hit send before I could change my mind. The Monday morning air in the office was recycled and cold, the kind of temperature designed to keep people awake rather than comfortable. I had barely put my bag down when Jessica, the head of public relations, appeared in my doorway. She was holding a tablet like a shield, her knuckles white against the black case. "We need to talk about the narrative." "Lydia," she said, not waiting for an invitation to sit. I looked at her. Jessica was a woman who lived her life in press releases. She spoke in bullet points and managed crisis simulations for fun. Today, she looked particularly vibratory. "Good morning to you too, Jessica," I said, sitting down and waking my computer. "I assume this is about the business standard interview?" "It is," she said, sliding into the chair opposite me. "This is a big exposure opportunity. Lydia, huge. But Celeste Halden is not a lifestyle blogger. She is a shark. We have done a risk assessment on her previous coverage. She goes for the jugular on corporate governance. I know who she is." I said, "She is marrying my brother." Jessica waved a hand dismissively. "That makes it worse. Familiarity breeds contempt. Or at least, it lowers your guard. We cannot have you going off script. The leadership team is very concerned about how the pause on the velocity feature will look in print." I felt a tightness in my chest. Project Velocity. That was the ghost in the machine. 2 years ago, we had built a feature that allowed instant credit access based on social graph data rather than income history. It was innovative, fast, and, as I discovered during the beta test, completely discriminatory against zip codes with lower property values. I had killed it. It was the only time I had ever threatened to resign. The pause was necessary. I said, "It was a compliance issue." Jessica narrowed her eyes. "In the interview, it was a strategic pivot. We paused to refine the user experience. We did not pause because the algorithm was redlining people. Do you understand the difference?" "I understand the difference between the truth and the story." I said, "Good," Jessica said. "I will be sitting in on the interview." "Of course. To facilitate, and if she asks about the technical debt, you pivot to our investment in future proofing. If she asks about the churn rate, you talk about our high-value user retention." She stood up, smoothing her skirt. "Do not let her charm you. Lydia, she is not your friend right now. She is the press, and the press is never on our side." She left the office, leaving a scent of expensive floral perfume and anxiety in her wake. I looked at my calendar. The official interview was scheduled for Wednesday, but I had a text message from Celeste that had come in at 6 in the morning. "Coffee at the grind, 10 o'clock. Just us. Off the record." I had replied yes before I could overthink it. Now, looking at the empty chair where Jessica had just outlined my script, I realized I was already breaking the rules. The Grind was a small, independent coffee shop 3 blocks from the Aris Financial Tower. The kind of place that served coffee in chipped ceramic mugs and played obscure jazz. It was neutral ground. Celeste was already there, sitting at a corner table with her back to the wall. She was wearing a trench coat over a crisp white shirt. Her hair pulled back in that severe, elegant knot. She was reading a physical newspaper, a pen in her hand. I walked over. She looked up, and her face softened into a smile that felt genuine, though I was starting to question my ability to read her. "Lydia," she said, "thank you for coming." I sat down. She had already ordered me a black coffee. "I hope this is okay," she said. "I hate doing the first pass in a conference room. People are different under fluorescent lights. They recite lines." I took a sip of the coffee. It was hot and bitter. Jessica would have a heart attack if she knew I was here. I said, Celeste laughed. A low, dry sound. "I bet. Your PR team sent me an email this morning outlining the scope of discussion. It was 3 pages long. They really want to keep me away from the Velocity project." I froze. The mug stopped halfway to my mouth. "They mentioned that I asked—" "No," Celeste said, watching me over the rim of her cup. "They didn't mention it at all. That is how I knew they were worried about it." She put her cup down. The friendly sister-in-law vibe evaporated. In its place was something sharper, like a lens coming into focus. "Lydia, I want to write a story about ethical fintech. I really do. But to do that, I need to understand the cost of ethics. It is easy to be ethical when you are profitable. It is hard when you are bleeding cash and your investors are screaming for growth. She leaned forward. 2 years ago, Aris was missing its quarterly targets. The stock was down 12%. You had velocity ready to launch. It was projected to bring in 50,000 new users in the first month. And then, 3 days before the rollout, you pulled the kill switch. She paused, waiting. I said nothing. My sources say the engineering team was furious. Celeste continued. They say the VP of sales actually threw a chair, but you held the line. Why I looked at her. She wasn't looking for the strategic pivot line. She knew. She knew about the chair. That detail had never left the executive floor. It wasn't ready, I said carefully. Celeste raised an eyebrow. The code was ready. The UI was ready. What wasn't ready? I took a breath. I looked around the coffee shop. No one was listening. The data wasn't clean. I said, we found a correlation we hadn't anticipated. If we had launched, we would have been exposing a vulnerable population to interest rates they couldn't sustain, based on data that shouldn't have been part of the risk profile. Celeste nodded slowly. She didn't write anything down. She just absorbed it. So you chose the integrity of the product over the stock price. She said, I chose not to get sued by the Department of Justice. I said, same thing, usually. She said. She took a sip of her coffee, her eyes never leaving mine. Who stood with you when you killed it? Who had your back? No one. I said, it was my call. I was the product lead. Interesting. Celeste said. She tapped her pen against the table. Because that is not how the story is being told in the market. What do you mean? She shook her head. We can get into that later. For now, I just wanted to know if you were real. If I was real, there is a version of you that exists on paper. Lydia, quiet, diligent, a safe pair of hands. And then there is the version of you that killed a multi-million-dollar feature because it was morally bankrupt. I needed to know which one I was interviewing. Which one am I asked. Celeste smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. You are the one who is in trouble, Lydia, because people who care about the truth usually are. I walked back to the office feeling like I had just stepped off a boat. The ground felt unsteady. Celeste knew too much. She had sources inside the company. Deep inside. My phone buzzed as I entered the lobby. It was Graham. Hey kid, heard Celeste is grilling you this week. I told her to go easy. But you know how she is. Just give her the good stuff. I put in a good word for you, told her you're the brains of the operation. You're welcome. Let's do dinner after this blows over. I stared at the screen. I put in a good word. He was framing this entire high-stakes corporate investigation as a favor he had arranged for his little sister. He wanted me to feel indebted. He wanted me to think that Celeste's interest in me was a byproduct of his influence, a crumb from his table. I didn't reply. I couldn't. When I got back to my desk, the atmosphere had shifted. The open-plan office, usually a hum of keyboards and low conversations, felt sharp. I saw Jason, a product manager who had joined 6 months ago from a competitor, standing near the water cooler with the VP of growth. They stopped talking when I walked by. Jason gave me a tight smile. Hey, Lydia, Jason said. Big week for you. The interview. I nodded. Just doing my part for the brand. Right, Jason said. He took a step closer. Listen, about the new partnership with DataCore. The leadership team wants to move the timeline up. They want the integration done by end of Q3. That is impossible, I said automatically. We haven't even finished the privacy audit. DataCore scrapes user data from third-party apps. We need to make sure we aren't ingesting anything non-compliant. Jason sighed, looking at the VP of growth. See, this is what I was talking about. Caution is great, Lydia, but we are in a race. Sometimes you have to build the plane while you fly it. I am not against speed. Jason, I said, keeping my voice even, I am against crashing. The VP of growth looked at me. He was a man who viewed regulatory hurdles as personal insults. Lydia, we need aggression right now, he said. We need to capture the market share before the fiscal year ends. Jason has a plan to bypass the full audit for the beta group. I want you to sign off on it. I cannot sign off on that. I said, it violates our internal governance protocols. The VP looked at me for a long moment. Then he looked at Jason. Work it out, he said, and walked away. Jason turned to me, his smile gone. You are getting a reputation, Lydia, for what I asked, doing my job, for being a bottleneck, he said, and for thinking you are the only one with a moral compass. It is not a good look, especially when you are about to go on the record with a journalist. Be careful what you say. Lydia, we are all on the same team. He walked away. I stood there, feeling the walls closing in. The message was clear: get on board with the risky new strategy, or get run over. Wednesday arrived with the subtlety of a sledgehammer. The conference room was set up like a stage. Jessica had placed bottles of sparkling water on the table, arranged in a perfect triangle. She had a notepad, a recorder, and a printed sheet of key talking points in front of her. Celeste walked in exactly on time. She was wearing a navy suit this time, sharper, more corporate. She carried a leather portfolio and a small digital recorder. She nodded to Jessica, but her eyes locked on mine. Shall we begin? Celeste asked. Jessica cleared her throat. Just a reminder, Celeste, that we are on a tight schedule, and we would like to focus on the future of ARIS, specifically the upcoming roadmap. Celeste ignored her. She placed her recorder on the table and pressed the red button. This is Celeste Halden, interviewing Lydia Ward, Senior Product Strategist at ARIS Financial. Also present is Jessica Tate, VP of Communications. She looked at me. Lydia, let's start with the concept of ethical friction. In your white paper from last year, you wrote that friction is the only thing standing between speed and negligence. Do you still believe that? Given the company's push for the new zero-click partnership with DataCore, I froze. The DataCore partnership wasn't public. It was barely internal. Jessica jumped in immediately. We have not announced any partnership with DataCore. That is speculation. Celeste didn't look at Jessica. She looked at me. I am asking about the philosophy. Lydia, if you believe friction is necessary for safety, how do you justify a strategy that removes it entirely to access third-party data? I could feel Jessica's eyes boring into the side of my head. I could hear Jason's voice saying bottleneck. I could see Graham's text saying, you're welcome. I believe that friction is... I started, my voice wavering slightly. I cleared my throat. I believe that speed without verification is risk. My job is to manage that risk. If we were to pursue a partnership that removed friction, we would have to replace it with back-end verification that is twice as robust. Jessica interrupted. What Lydia means is that we are always balancing user experience with security. Our users want speed. We give them speed. Celeste turned to Jessica. She picked up her pen and wrote something down in her notebook. She didn't speak. She just wrote. The silence stretched, heavy and awkward. Jessica shifted in her seat. Celeste turned back to me. Let's talk about credit models, she said. There is a rumor that the architecture you built for the risk assessment, the one you are quite proud of, was actually advisory work done by an external consultant. Is that true? I blinked. What no? I built that architecture. My team built it. Are you sure? Celeste asked. Because I have seen documentation that suggests the core logic was developed by a strategic advisor named Graham Ward. The room seemed to tilt. Graham, I said. My brother Jessica looked confused. Your brother works here. No. I said, he doesn't work here. He is in real estate and private equity. He doesn't know anything about algorithmic risk logic. Celeste slid a piece of paper across the table. It was a printout of a slide deck. The branding was unfamiliar Ward Partners Consulting, but the diagram on the slide was mine. It was the exact compliance node structure I had fought to keep in the presentation on Monday. The text below it read, Proprietary Risk Loop, developed by Graham Ward for ARIS Financial. I stared at the paper. The lines were mine. The logic was mine. Even the variable names verify_null_set were my own shorthand. I don't know what this is, I said. Jessica reached out and snatched the paper. This is clearly a misunderstanding. We can clarify the IP ownership later. Let's move on." Celeste didn't move on. She watched me. "Lydia, did your brother advise you on this project? Did he consult for heiress?" "No," I whispered. "Never. Then why is he claiming credit for the intellectual property that defines your career?" The interview ended 10 minutes later. I barely remember what I said. I walked out of the conference room in a daze. Jessica was furious, ranting about leaks and legal action, but I couldn't hear her. I went back to my desk and sat down. My hands were shaking. Proprietary risk loop. I opened my browser. I typed in the URL I had seen on the bottom of the printout. https://google.com/search_Q=Ward partners.com. It was a slick portfolio site. There were photos of Graham shaking hands with men in suits. There were testimonials, and there was a case studies section. I clicked on it. Fintech optimization, how we restructured risk for a leading platform. I clicked the link. There it was. My work, my slides, my words. Implemented a dynamic friction model to balance acquisition with compliance. That was a sentence I had written in a private memo to the CEO 3 years ago. I had sent it to Graham once, asking for his advice on the tone because I was nervous about sending it. He had told me it was a little dry and that I should spice it up. He hadn't just read it. He had kept it, and he had sold it, but it wasn't just the slides. I scrolled down. Awards and recognition. Nominee, Innovator of the Year. Harbor City Business Journal. For the development of the Ward Risk Protocol. The Ward Risk Protocol. He had named my algorithm after himself. I felt sick. A physical wave of nausea rolled through me. It wasn't just theft. It was erasure. He had taken the one thing I had that was purely mine, my mind, my competence, and he had pasted his face over it. And Celeste knew. That was why she had asked. She wasn't just fact-checking. She was showing me the weapon she had found. My phone buzzed. A text from Celeste. "Check your email. I sent you the full list." I opened my email. There was a PDF attached. fact_Lydia_Ward.pdf. It was a list of claims Graham had made publicly over the last 5 years. Claimed to be a silent partner in Aris Financial. Claimed to have fixed the velocity bug. Claimed to have introduced Lydia Ward to her current CEO. Claimed that Lydia Ward works under his mentorship. I stared at the last one. Works under his mentorship. I picked up my phone. I dialed Graham. He answered on the second ring. "Hey, superstar. How was the interview?" "Did you dazzle them, Graham?" I said. My voice was quiet. "What's wrong? You sound weird." "Did Celeste go hard on you?" I told her to be nice. "I found your website. Graham." There was a pause. A silence that lasted 3 seconds too long. "Oh, that," Graham said. His tone changed. It shifted from the boisterous brother to something smoother, slippery. "You mean the portfolio? I mean the part where you claim you wrote my code?" I said, "I mean the part where you call my work the Ward Risk Protocol. Lydia." "Relax," he said. He laughed. A dismissive, airy sound. "It's just marketing. You know how it is. I needed to flesh out the fintech section of my bio for a pitch meeting. It's not like I'm actually coding. I'm just showing potential clients that I understand the landscape. It's family teamwork. I support you. You support me. You stole my work. Graham, you are telling people you did my job. I am telling people I advised you," he said, "which I do. All the time. Who do you call when you're crying about your boss, me? Who tells you how to handle the politics? Me, technically. Lydia. Without my coaching, you wouldn't even be in that job. So yeah, I have a stake in it." He wasn't denying it. He was rewriting reality in real time. "Celeste knows." I said, "She showed me." Graham's voice went cold. Instantaneously. "What did you tell her I told her the truth?" "I told her I didn't know what she was talking about." "Good," Graham said. "Keep it that way. Listen to me. Lydia, do not make Celeste suspicious. She is looking for a story. If you start acting dramatic and claiming I stole your little slides, she is going to think there is a scandal. She will dig, and if she digs, she might find things that blow back on you. On me, I asked. On the family, Graham said. On Dad. On the wedding. You don't want to be the reason your brother's engagement falls apart, do you? You don't want to be the jealous little sister who couldn't handle sharing the spotlight. I held the phone so tight my fingers hurt. It's not sharing. Graham, it's lying. It's leverage. Lydia, he snapped, it helps me close deals. And when I close deals, the family does well. You do well. Don't be selfish. Just laugh it off. Tell Celeste I'm a proud big brother who likes to brag. Make it a joke. He paused. Do not make this a problem. Lydia, I mean it. The line went dead. I lowered the phone. I looked at the empty office around me. The sun was setting, casting long, distorted shadows across the floor. I saw the shape of it now, the triangle. Graham was using me as a resource, a mine he could strip for credibility whenever he needed to sound smart. Celeste was using me as a weapon, a way to get to the truth about the man she was marrying, or perhaps to the corruption she sensed in his orbit. And I was in the middle. If I told the truth, I destroyed my family. If I lied, I destroyed myself. I looked at the PDF on my screen again. Claimed to be a silent partner in Aris Financial. If Graham was telling people he was a partner, and if he was pushing for the DataCore deal, I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the office air conditioning. I wasn't just a resource, I was a shield. And Graham was holding me in front of something much darker than a stolen slide deck. The wind off the harbor was sharp enough to cut through my coat. Carrying the scent of salt and diesel fuel, Celeste had asked to meet me at the ferry terminal, a place of transit where no one stayed long enough to listen to anyone else's conversation. It was a gray Thursday, the kind of day that made Harbor City look like it was built out of wet concrete and bad intentions. I found her standing near the railing, watching a commuter boat churn the dark water. She didn't look like a bride-to-be. She looked like a detective on a stakeout. You came, she said, not turning her head. You said it was urgent, I replied. I stood next to her, keeping a foot of distance between us. It is verification. She said, standard procedure. But I wanted to do it in person. She finally turned to face me. The wind whipped a loose strand of dark hair across her face, but she didn't brush it away. Her eyes were searching, scanning my face for something she hadn't found in my personnel file. I have a source, she said, keeping her voice low. A source who claims that the internal audit on the Velocity project was never completed. They claim that the documentation was forged to appease the board. My stomach dropped. That is not true. I said, I paused the project specifically because the audit wasn't finished. I refused to sign off on it. I know that. Celeste said, and I know you believe that, but this source has documents. They have a compliance sign-off sheet with a signature on it. Whose signature, I asked. Yours, she said. The sound of the ferry horn blasted, drowning out the sudden rush of air from my lungs. I stared at her. I never signed it. I said, I never signed anything. I believe you, Celeste said. And that is the problem. Because if you didn't sign it, then someone else did, using your name. And if that document surfaces during a regulatory review, you are not just looking at a firing, Lydia. You are looking at liability. Criminal liability. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. I am trying to figure out if you are the architect of this mess, or the insulation. The insulation, the layer of material they put in the walls to keep the heat in, she said, or to keep the fire from spreading. Are you the one making the decisions, or are you the one they are going to burn to save the house? I looked at the water. It was churning, violent and murky. Why are you telling me this? I asked. You are a journalist. If you have a scoop about fraud at a fintech unicorn, why aren't you running it? Because, Celeste said, and for the first time, her professional mask slipped. She looked tired. She looked human. Because I am marrying your brother, and if I write this story, and it destroys you, I have to sit across from you at Thanksgiving for the rest of my life. She looked back at the city skyline. But if I don't write it, and someone else does, or if the regulators find it first, then I am just another person who watched you get hit by a train and didn't scream." She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper. "This is the date on the signature," she said. "Check your calendar. Check your emails. Prove to me you were nowhere near that document." I took the paper. My hand was shaking. "Lydia," she said, her voice soft now, "be careful. The people who forge signatures are usually the people who can afford to hire the best lawyers when the truth comes out. You can't." I went straight to Elena's apartment after work. Elena had been my best friend since college. A jagged, brilliant woman who worked in crisis management for a hospital network. She dealt with disasters for a living. I poured 2 glasses of wine while Elena read the notes I had made after meeting Celeste. I told her everything: the website, the stolen slides, the ward risk protocol, and now the forged signature. Elena sat on her plush velvet sofa, reading the paper Celeste had given me. She didn't look shocked. She looked resigned. "He is not just stealing your work, Lids," she said, tossing the paper onto the coffee table. "He is stealing your liability." "What do you mean?" I asked, sinking into the armchair. "Think about it," she said. "Graham is a consultant. Consultants get paid for advice, but they don't sign the paperwork. They don't have fiduciary responsibility. You do. You are the internal officer." She stood up and started pacing. "He takes credit for the genius ideas on his website," she said, counting off on her fingers. "That gets him clients. That gets him clout. But inside your company, where the actual risk lives, he is invisible, and you are the face of the product. If the product works, the company takes the credit. If the product fails, or worse, if it breaks the law, who is on the hook?" "The person who signed the compliance sheet," I whispered. "Exactly," Elena said. "He is setting you up as the credible face. You are the perfect patsy. Lydia, you are diligent, you are quiet, and you are family. Who would suspect that your own brother was the one pulling the strings from the outside? But he doesn't work there," I argued. "He can't forge my signature." Elena stopped pacing and looked at me with pity. "Lydia," she said, "he knows your password, he knows your schedule, and he knows people in your company. You said he introduced you to the CEO, right?" I nodded. "So he has a back channel," she said. "He is not doing this alone. He has a friend on the inside." I felt cold. The wine tasted like vinegar. "You need to get a lawyer," Elena said. "Not a family lawyer, an employment lawyer, a shark." "I can't." I said, "If I get a lawyer, it goes on the record. It starts a war. Graham is getting married in 3 months. My parents—" "Screw the wedding," Elena snapped. "This isn't about a party. This is about prison. Lydia, if that signature is real, and the SEC comes knocking, do you think Graham is going to stand up and say, 'Oh, sorry, that was me'? No, he's going to say, 'My sister was under a lot of pressure. I tried to help her, but she went rogue.'" I stared at her. It sounded exactly like something Graham would say. He would say it with a sad shake of his head. Looking noble and heartbroken, he would destroy me to save his reputation. I said. Elena sat down next to me and took my hand. "He already has." She said, "You just haven't felt the impact yet." The next morning, the calendar invite appeared on my screen: all hands strategic partnership announcement, mandatory attendance. The auditorium was packed. The air conditioning was humming, battling the heat of 200 bodies. I sat near the back, trying to make myself small. The CEO, Marcus Thorne, walked onto the stage. He was a charismatic man, the kind who wore sneakers with suits and spoke in inspirational quotes. Graham had introduced us 5 years ago at a charity gala. At the time, I thought it was a lucky break. Now, I wondered if it was a placement. "Team," Marcus said, his voice amplified and warm. "We are at a pivot point. The market is demanding speed. It is demanding personalization. And to give them that, we need data." He clicked a clicker. The screen behind him filled with a logo, DataCore. I stiffened. "We are thrilled to announce a strategic integration with DataCore," Marcus said. "This isn't just a partnership, it is a synergy. By integrating their consumer behavior graph with our transactional layer, we can offer frictionless approval for 90% of our applicants. The room applauded. I didn't. Frictionless approval meant no checks. It meant using data that users hadn't explicitly consented to share shopping habits, location data, social connections to determine creditworthiness. It was the exact opposite of the ethical framework I had built. We are calling it the 360 view. Marcus continued. And the best part, we are rolling it out next week. Next week, my head snapped up. An integration like that took months to test for bias. If they were doing it in a week, they weren't testing it. They were just plugging it in. Marcus smiled at the audience. And I want to thank the product team for their incredible work in making this happen. He said, specifically, the strategy team for clearing the regulatory path. He looked in my direction. I felt 100 heads turn. He was thanking me. He was publicly thanking me for a disaster I had opposed. After the meeting, I went back to my desk, my heart hammering against my ribs. I opened my email. There was a message from the VP of Growth. David. Subject sign-off required. 360. View compliance summary. Lydia. Attached is the final compliance summary for the data core integration. We need your signature by end of day to clear the board update. I opened the attachment. It was a 3-page document. It was beautifully written. It used all the right buzzwords. It claimed that the 360 view adhered to all Fair Credit Reporting Act guidelines. It claimed that an extensive internal audit had proven zero bias in the new datasets. And at the bottom, there was a line for my name. I, Lydia Ward, Senior Product Strategist, certify that this product meets all internal ethical and regulatory standards. I read the document again. It was a lie. We hadn't audited the data core data. We hadn't even seen the source code. I hit reply. David, I cannot sign this. We have not performed the bias testing mentioned in paragraph 4. The claim about zero bias is unsubstantiated. I need at least 4 weeks to run the models. I sent it. 5 minutes later, my office door opened. It was David. He didn't knock. Lydia, he said. He closed the door behind him. He was smiling, but it was a tight, grim expression. We don't have 4 weeks. Then we don't have a compliant product, I said, keeping my hands on my desk to hide the shaking. David sighed. He walked over to the window and looked out. Lydia, I know you are a perfectionist. We appreciate that. But this isn't an engineering seminar. This is a business. The board needs this partnership to close the quarter. If we miss the window, the stock tanks. Do you want to be responsible for layoffs? I am trying to prevent a lawsuit. David, we have legal counsel for that, he said. He turned back to me. Look, the language in the summary is aspirational. It represents our goals. We will catch up to the testing post-launch. But right now, I need you to be a team player. He leaned his hands on my desk. This is a make-or-break quarter for us. Lydia, and frankly, for you. There are questions about your fit here. People are saying you have lost your nerve, that you are too slow for this level of growth. He let the threat hang in the air. Sign the document. Lydia, show us you are on the bus. I looked at the document on my screen. I looked at David. I will sign a version that states we are commencing testing. I said, I will not certify results I haven't seen. David straightened up. His politeness turned glacial. I see, he said. That is disappointing. I will have to escalate this to Marcus. He walked out. I sat there, feeling the silence of the room. I had just drawn a line in the sand, and I knew, with absolute certainty, that the tide was coming in. At 5 o'clock, I walked out of the building. I needed air. I needed to escape the recycled oxygen and the pressure. As I stepped onto the sidewalk, a silver sports car pulled up to the curb. The window rolled down. Hey, stranger. It was Graham. He was wearing sunglasses, looking like he had just stepped off a yacht. Get in, he said. Let's celebrate. Celebrate what I asked. Not moving. Life success. The fact that it is a Tuesday. Come on, I'll buy you a drink. I didn't want to get in, but standing on the sidewalk felt exposed. I opened the door and slid into the leather seat. Graham sped off into traffic, weaving through the rush hour congestion with aggressive ease. "So," he said, glancing at me, "I heard the announcement. Datacore. That is big time. Lids, huge. I told Marcus that was the move 3 years ago. Glad he finally listened. You told him I asked." "Yeah, over golf," I said. "Marcus, data is the new oil. You need a pipeline." He loved it. I stared at his profile. He had planted the seed. He had pushed the CEO toward the very thing that was now crushing me. "It is a privacy nightmare." "Graham," I said. "Oh, stop," he said, waving a hand. "Privacy is dead. Convenience won. You worry too much. That is your problem. You have always been a worrier." He pulled up to a valet stand in front of a high-end steakhouse. Inside, he ordered a bottle of expensive red wine without asking me what I wanted. "So," he said, pouring me a glass, "how is the interview prep going? Celeste said you guys talked again." He was trying to sound casual, but his eyes were tight. He was watching me. "We talked." I said, "What did she ask?" he asked. "Did she bring up the old stuff, the Velocity project?" "She asked about a signature." I said. Graham froze. The glass stopped halfway to his mouth. "What signature?" "She claims there is a document with my signature on it, approving a project I killed. She claims someone forged it." Graham put the glass down. He picked up his napkin and dabbed his mouth. "That is ridiculous," he said. "Celeste is... She is reaching. She is looking for drama where there isn't any. You know how journalists are. They need a villain. She thinks I am the villain. Graham, or the victim. She is trying to figure out which." Graham laughed, but it was hollow. "You are neither. Lydia, you are a success story. Just tell her that. Tell her you signed it." I looked at him. The noise of the restaurant seemed to fade away. "What?" "Tell her you signed it," Graham said. He leaned forward, his voice intense. "Look, if you say you didn't sign it, you are accusing the company of fraud. You are accusing Marcus. That blows everything up. The stock, your job, my reputation because I vouched for you. So you want me to lie?" I asked. "You want me to tell a reporter that I approved a fraudulent document? It is not a lie. It is smoothing things over," Graham said. "Just say, 'Oh yeah, that was a preliminary draft.'" I signed off on the concept. "Keep it vague. Protect the house. Lydia, protect your house." "You mean..." "Same thing." He snapped. His charm vanished. He looked ugly. Suddenly, "If Iris goes down, Lydia, I lose a lot of credibility. I have investors who trust me because of my connection there. You are not just messing with your little job. You are messing with my capital." He took a breath and forced the smile back onto his face. "Just handle it. Okay, for the family. Mom and Dad are so excited about the wedding. Don't be the dark cloud. I didn't drink the wine." I excused myself, saying I had a headache, and took a cab home. My apartment was dark when I got in. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the floor, leaning against the wall, and watched the city lights blink outside. My phone chimed, a voice note from Celeste. I hesitated. Then I pressed play. Her voice filled the quiet room. It sounded tinny, recorded in a car or a hallway. "Lydia, I am not going to ask you how your day was. I know there was an all-hands. I know about Datacore. Listen to me very carefully. If someone asks you to sign something you didn't write, don't. That is not just corporate politics. That is a trap. If you sign it, you own the past. If you refuse, they will try to fire you. Let them. Being fired is better than being indicted." The message ended. I stared at the phone. If someone asks you to sign something you didn't write, she knew. She knew about the document David had given me. She knew the exact timing. How was she bugging the office? No, that was impossible. She had a source who knew the internal movements of the executive team. Graham. I stood up. My mind was racing. Graham had told me he advised Marcus. Graham had told me he suggested the Datacore deal. Graham wasn't just observing Eris. He was orchestrating it. And if Graham was the source, why would he tell Celeste about the signature? Why would he tip her off to the fraud? Unless he was feeding her just enough truth to make the story credible, but spinning it to make me the bad guy. If Celeste wrote a story saying, Lydia Ward signed off on fraudulent loans, Graham could throw his hands up and say, I had no idea my sister was so reckless. He would distance himself. He would survive. I would be the cautionary tale. But Celeste's voice note, she was warning me. She wasn't buying his narrative. She was testing it. She was giving me a lifeline. I went to my computer. I needed to know how deep this went. I searched my email archives. I searched for Graham. I searched for Ward. Nothing new. Then I remembered the domain from the slide deck. https:// google.com/search q=wardpartners.com. I searched my inbox for any external emails from similar domains. I searched for consulting. I searched for proposal. And then I found it. It was in my trash folder. Deleted 3 years ago. I hadn't deleted it. The IT admin must have scrubbed it. But I had a backup archive on my local drive. From g.ward@gwadvisory.net to marcus.thorn@arisfin. Come subject proposal risk architecture leadership alignment. It was dated 4 months before I was promoted to senior strategist. I opened the email. Marcus, great catching up. Per our discussion, I have outlined a strategy to bypass the traditional compliance bottlenecks. We can build a shadow risk layer that looks robust for the auditors, but allows for the volume you need. Regarding the personnel, I recommend promoting Lydia to the senior role. She is highly competent technically, but she is conflict avoidant. She will build the structure we need, and she will not ask the hard questions about the data inputs if we frame it as efficiency. She trusts me. I can manage her. Let's move forward. Graham, I read the paragraph again. She is conflict avoidant. She will not ask the hard questions. I can manage her. He hadn't just stolen my work. He had sold my personality as a feature. He had pitched my loyalty as a weakness to be exploited. He had gotten me promoted not because I was good, but because I was controllable. I felt a scream building in my chest, hot and jagged. All the times he had comforted me, all the times he had told me I was too smart for them, all the times he had told me to trust the process. He was grooming me. He was grooming me to be the fall guy for a shadow risk layer he had invented. And now, with the data core deal, he was cashing in the chips. I looked at the screen until the words blurred. I had the evidence. This email proved conspiracy. It proved Graham was the architect of the fraud. If I gave this to Celeste, she would have the story of the decade. The brother who sold his sister. It would destroy Graham. It would end his engagement. It would break my parents' hearts. They would never forgive me. I would be the daughter who ruined the family because she couldn't take a joke, couldn't keep a secret. But if I didn't give it to her, I looked at the compliance document I had refused to sign. If I didn't give it to her, David would fire me. They would forge my signature again. And when the house of cards collapsed, I would be the one buried under the rubble. My phone buzzed again. It was my mother. Lydia, don't forget brunch on Sunday. Graham says the wedding invitations are ready to go out. We need to help address them. Love you. I looked at the message. Love you. I looked at the email. I can manage her. I realized then that I didn't have a brother. I had a handler. And for the first time in 32 years, I decided that I didn't want to be managed. I hit forward, but I didn't type Celeste's address. Not yet. I typed my own personal email address. I sent the evidence to a safe harbor. Then I opened a new document. I began to type a timeline, not a defense, an indictment. If Graham wanted a war, he was going to find out that the conflict-avoidant sister had learned a few things about strategy. And the first lesson was never let the enemy know you are armed until you are ready to shoot. The venue Graham had chosen for the engagement party was called the Alabaster, a converted industrial space in the Arts District that smelled of polished concrete and money. It was the kind of place where the lighting was designed to make everyone look 10 years younger and twice as wealthy. I arrived 20 minutes late, hoping to slip in unnoticed, but Graham had positioned himself near the entrance like a monarch holding court. He was wearing a tuxedo that fit him with architectural precision, his hand resting possessively on Celeste's lower back. "Lydia," he called out, his voice booming over the ambient jazz. "Fashionably late. I like it." A power move. He pulled me into a hug that felt more like a restraint than a greeting. "You look great." "Lids," he whispered in my ear. "Smile. The photographer is from the society pages." I pulled back and forced a smile. Celeste was standing next to him, wearing a white structural gown that looked like a piece of modern art. She looked stunning, but there was a glassy quality to her eyes, a detachment that I recognized. She was physically present, shaking hands and accepting compliments, but her mind was somewhere else, likely dissecting the room like a crime scene. "Congratulations," I said to her. "You look beautiful." "Celeste, thank you." "Lydia," she said. Her voice was cool, calibrated. Graham clapped his hands. "All right, go mingle. There are some people here you need to meet. Big players. I told them you were coming." I walked into the room. It wasn't a party. It was a merger and acquisition with an open bar. I recognized half the faces from the business section of the newspaper. There were venture capitalists, local politicians, and a handful of tech CEOs who looked like they were calculating the ROI of their cocktails. I grabbed a glass of champagne from a passing tray and found a corner near a potted fern. From my vantage point, I watched Graham. He was in his element. He moved from group to group, laughing, touching arms, leaning in to whisper confidences. He looked like the sun around which the entire room orbited, and Celeste was his moon, reflecting his light but generating none of her own. She stood beside him, nodding, smiling at the right moments. But I saw her eyes tracking the conversations. She wasn't just listening, she was mapping the room. She was watching who Graham deferred to, who deferred to Graham, and who looked at him with that specific mix of fear and respect that usually indicated a debt. I took a sip of champagne. It was dry and tasted like apples. Lydia Ward. I turned. A man in a velvet blazer was standing there, holding a scotch. He looked to be in his 50s, with silver hair and teeth that were aggressively white. "Yes," I said. "Jim Sterling," he said, extending a hand. "I am a managing partner at Redstone Capital. Your brother speaks very highly of you." "Hi, Jim," I said, shaking his hand. "He told me about the work you're doing at Aris." Jim said, "Fascinating stuff." The way Graham described the risk architecture, this idea of a shadow layer for compliance, it is brilliant. Truly. He said he basically sketched it out on a napkin for you guys, and you ran with it. My stomach dropped. The shadow layer. That was the phrase Graham had used in the email I found. The email where he pitched my compliance as a weakness. He said that I asked. My voice tight. "Oh, absolutely," Jim said, chuckling. "He is a proud big brother," he said. "My sister is the operator, but I am the architect." It is a great dynamic. You need the vision and the execution. He is lucky to have someone like you to build his ideas. I felt the blood drain from my face. He didn't build my ideas. "Jim," I said, "I built them. They are my designs." Jim laughed again, as if I had made a charmingly self-deprecating joke. Of course," he said, patting my shoulder. "Execution is 90% of the battle. Do not sell yourself short. But that strategic vision, that is pure Graham. I mean, the man sees around corners. That is why we are looking at investing in his new fund. If he can turn a compliance officer into a profit center, imagine what he can do with real capital." He winked at me and walked away. I stood there, frozen. Turn a compliance officer into a profit center. That was me. I was the compliance officer. And Graham was selling me as a feature of his genius a puppet he had trained to dance around the regulations so he could make money for men like Jim Sterling. He wasn't just stealing my credit. He was selling my integrity. I needed air. The room felt suddenly hot, the smell of expensive perfume and ambition suffocating. I turned and walked toward the glass doors that led to the terrace. The night air was cool. The terrace was empty. Save for a few smokers huddled near the heater, I walked to the far railing and gripped the cold metal. Trying to breathe. Nice night for a panic attack. I jumped. Celeste was standing in the shadows, leaning against a pillar. She had a cigarette in her hand. Unlit. I didn't know you smoked. I said, I don't. She said, I just like holding it. It gives me an excuse to step outside. She walked over to the railing and stood next to me. She looked out at the city lights. Jim Sterling is a loudmouth, she said. You heard him? I asked. I hear everything, Celeste said. It is an occupational hazard. She turned the cigarette over in her fingers. Does it ever feel like you are a character in a book someone else is writing, she asked. Like you wake up in the morning and you have lines to say. But you didn't write them every day, I said. Celeste nodded. She looked at me, and the detachment in her eyes cracked, revealing a deep, exhausted sadness. I received another tip today. Lydia. She said, about Eris, about you. I stiffened. What kind of tip? An anonymous email, she said, from a Proton Mail account. It laid out the entire timeline of the DataCore partnership. It had dates, meeting notes, everything, and the narrative of the email was very specific. It claimed that the CEO, Marcus, was hesitant about the deal because of privacy concerns, but that the senior product strategist pushed it through. It claimed that you overruled the legal team because you wanted the growth bonus. I stared at her. That is a lie. That is the exact opposite of the truth. I am the one fighting it. Marcus is the one pushing it. I know, Celeste said, because I have sources in legal who told me you are the only reason they haven't been sued yet. Then why? I trailed off. Why would someone send me a detailed dossier framing you as the villain? Celeste asked. She looked back at the party inside, where Graham was laughing with a group of investors. She didn't say his name. She didn't have to. He is doing it, I whispered. He is creating a contingency plan. Celeste said, if the DataCore deal blows up, and it will, Lydia, because that data is dirty, he needs a scapegoat. He needs someone who looks competent enough to have done it, but expendable enough to burn. And if the deal succeeds, I asked, then he takes the credit for advising the genius strategist. She said, he wins either way, unless what? Unless the story changes, she said. Unless the narrator changes. She looked at me, her gaze intense. Lydia, I can't write the story that saves you if you don't give me the pen. I know you are scared. I know he's your brother, but he is feeding me poison and hoping I print it. He is using my byline to threaten your boss. He is probably telling Marcus right now, better do what I say, or my fiancé, the journalist, might find out about that compliance issue. I felt a chill go through me. That was exactly what he was doing. He was playing both sides. He was the arsonist and the firefighter. I can't. Celeste, I said, if I go on the record, my parents, they think he is the second coming. Your parents are watching a play. Lydia, Celeste said, they don't know the theater is burning down. The door to the terrace opened. Graham stepped out. There you two are, he shouted, throwing his arms wide. The two most important women in my life, hiding in the dark. Come on, we are doing speeches. He walked over and wrapped one arm around Celeste and the other around me. He squeezed us both tight. You guys bonding, he asked, looking from me to Celeste. I love that. Sisters, that is what it is all about. He kissed Celeste on the temple, then looked at me. His eyes were bright, hard, and completely devoid of warmth. Jim Sterling told me you were charming him. Lydia, good work. Keep him happy. He is writing a check next week. I pulled away from his arm. I am not charming him. Graham, I said, I am correcting him. He thought you designed the risk architecture. Graham's smile didn't waver, but his jaw tightened. Well, we are a team, aren't we? A team shares the wins. He leaned in closer, his voice dropping so only I could hear, while he kept his face arranged in a pleasant mask for the onlookers inside. Don't be petty, Lydia. It is unbecoming, and you are overreacting. Jim doesn't care about the details. He cares about the story. And right now, the story is that we are winning. He gripped my upper arm. His fingers dug into the soft flesh. If you embarrass me tonight, Lydia, if you make me look like I don't control my own people, I can make one call to Marcus. Just one. And you won't just be fired, you will be unhireable. I will make sure everyone in this town knows you are unstable. He pulled back and laughed loudly, as if I had just told a funny joke. Oh, Lydia, you are hilarious. Come on, let's go cut the cake. He dragged Celeste back inside. She looked back at me over her shoulder, her expression unreadable. I stayed on the terrace. My arm throbbed where he had grabbed me. I can make one call. It wasn't a bluff. He had the power. He had the connections. He had the narrative. I felt a hand on my shoulder. I flinched. It was my father. He looked soft and confused in his tuxedo, a man who was happy to be a guest in his son's magnificent life. Lydia, honey, he said, are you okay? You look a little flushed. I am fine. Dad, I said, just tired. You should come inside, he said. Graham is about to give a toast. He wants the family up there with him. I don't think I can do that. Dad, I said. Why not? He asked. He looked hurt. Lydia, please, don't be difficult. Not tonight. He is lying. Dad, I said. The words came out before I could stop them. He is lying about his work. He is lying about my work. He is using me. My father sighed. It was a long, heavy sound, the sound of a man who had spent 30 years ignoring the cracks in the foundation. Lydia, he said gently, Graham is enthusiastic. He has big dreams. Sometimes he exaggerates. We know that. But he loves you. He is trying to build something for all of us. He is threatening me. Dad, I said, he told me he would ruin my career if I embarrassed him. My father shook his head. Oh, honey, he didn't mean that. That is just Graham talking. He is under a lot of pressure. You know how he gets. He just needs support right now. He patted my cheek. Your job is to be the steady one. Lydia, you have always been the steady one. Graham is the kite, and you are the string. If you let go, he flies away. Just keep the peace. Okay, for your mother. She is so happy tonight. Discomfort is your job. The message was clear. My pain was acceptable collateral for Graham's glory. My integrity was the fuel for his engine. I looked at my father. I saw the fear in his eyes, the fear that if he actually looked at his son, he would see a monster, and he wasn't strong enough for that. Okay, Dad, I said quietly. I will come in. Good girl, he said. He smiled, relieved. Come on. I followed him back inside. I stood on the dais. I smiled when the photographer flashed his bulb. I clapped when Graham raised his glass and toasted to truth, love, and partnership. I watched Celeste sip her champagne, her eyes dead, and as the applause washed over us, I realized something. I wasn't the string. I was the anchor. And anchors didn't just hold ships in place. Sometimes, if you cut them loose at the right moment, they dragged the ship down. I left the party at 11 o'clock. I didn't say goodbye. I drove home in silence. The city blurred past me, a smear of neon and taillights. When I got to my apartment, I didn't go to sleep. I didn't wash my face. I took off my heels, leaving them in the middle of the hallway, and walked straight to my desk. I turned on my computer. The blue light flooded the dark room. I opened a new document. I named it The Timeline. I started at the beginning. Date November 14th, 3 years ago. Event. Graham Ward emails Marcus Thorne suggesting my promotion to manage shadow risk. Evidence archived email chain. Recovered from local drive. I typed, date February 2nd, 2 years ago. Event project velocity paused due to discriminatory outcomes in beta testing. My action refusal to sign launch authorization. Graham's action publicly claims credit for fixing velocity bug in interview with FinTech Daily. Evidence internal memo dated February 2. FinTech Daily article dated March 10th. I typed faster. The anger that had been choking me all night began to distill into something cold and sharp. It wasn't rage anymore. It was data. Date August 5th, last year. Event Graham launches Ward Partners website. Action appropriates ERA's financial internal slides. Proprietary risk loop as his own. IP. Evidence screenshot of website. Comparison with internal ERA's deck dated June 12th. Date today. Event engagement party. Action. Graham threatens professional retaliation if questioned. Witnesses none. I paused. Witnesses none. That was the problem. The threats were always in whispers. The coercion was always off the record. But the paper trail wasn't. I kept typing. Date upcoming. Event Data Core Partnership launch. Risk violation of FCRA and GDPR compliance. Graham's role anonymous source feeding false narrative to press Celeste Halden to frame Lydia Ward as decision-maker. Evidence Celeste Halden's verbal confirmation of anonymous tips matching Graham's knowledge base. I worked for 4 hours. By the time I finished, the document was 12 pages long. It was a map of systematic exploitation. It showed how Graham had built his career by strip mining mine. It showed how he had insulated himself from risk by gluing it to me. I printed it out. The pages were warm in my hands. I went to my closet and pulled out a shoebox from the top shelf. Inside were my old journals, a few photos, and a backup hard drive. I put the document in the box. Then I went back to the computer. I opened my email. I composed a new message to the HR department at Aris Financial. Subject: formal request for written confirmation of roles and responsibilities. Dear HR, in light of the upcoming strategic partnership with DataCore, and given the complex regulatory environment, I am requesting a formal written clarification of my decision-making authority regarding compliance sign-offs. Specifically, I want to clarify that my role is advisory, and that final authorization for third-party data integration rests with the executive leadership team. Please confirm this for my records. Regards, Lydia Ward. I hit send. It was a shot across the bow. It was me telling the company, I know what you are doing. I am creating a record. They would hate it. David would probably come into my office screaming on Monday. Let him scream. Next, I opened my personal calendar. I created an event for Monday evening. Appointment with employment attorney. I didn't have a name yet, but I would find one. Elena was right. I needed a shark. Finally. I looked at the contact info for Celeste Halden in my phone. I wanted to call her. I wanted to tell her everything. I wanted to say, "You are right. He is a monster. Save yourself." But I couldn't. Not yet. If I told her now, she might blow the story too early. She might confront Graham before I was safe. Graham would spin it. He would say I was jealous, hysterical, trying to ruin his happiness. My parents would back him up. I would be the villain. I needed undeniable proof. I needed to catch him in the act of framing me. I looked at the timeline again. The tipper. If Graham was sending anonymous tips to Celeste, he was doing it digitally. He was smart, but he was arrogant. He probably thought he was untraceable, but everyone leaves a trace. I remembered something. Graham used a specific password for everything. It was the name of his first dog, followed by the year he won the state debate championship, Buster 2012. He hadn't changed it in a decade. He said it was good luck. I opened a private browser window. I went to the login page for the domain host of https://google.com/search_q=wardpartners.com. I typed in his email address. I typed in Buster2012. Login failed. I tried Buster2012. Login failed. I sat back. Of course, he wasn't that stupid. But then I thought about Celeste. He was obsessed with her. He was obsessed with winning her. I typed in Celeste2024. Login failed. I typed in Celeste2025. The screen loaded. Welcome, Graham. I stared at the dashboard. He had updated his password to the year of his wedding. The arrogance was breathtaking. I navigated to the email settings. I didn't want to read his client emails. I wanted to see his sent folder, and there it was. Not from his main account, but from an alias he had set up under the domain admin at secure-drop.net. I clicked on the sent folder. 3 emails to Chalden at business-standard.com. The subjects were tip regarding Aris Financial, compliance failure at Aris, Lydia Ward. Background. I opened the last one. Celeste. You should look into Lydia Ward's history with the Velocity Project. Sources say she suppressed the negative data to hit her bonus targets. She is ambitious. Don't let the quiet act fool you. I read it twice. She is ambitious. Don't let the quiet act fool you. He was using the exact words he used to praise me to our parents: quiet, ambitious, and twisting them into a knife. I didn't forward the emails. That would leave a log. I took out my phone and took photos of the screen. I took photos of the headers, the timestamps, the IP addresses. I logged out. I cleared my browser history. I sat in the dark. The phone heavy in my hand. I had him. I had the proof that he was actively trying to destroy me. But I couldn't use it yet. The engagement party was just the rehearsal. The wedding was the main event. And the data core launch was the pyrotechnics. I needed to wait for the moment when he felt safest, when he thought he had won. I looked at the photo of the email on my phone screen. Don't let the quiet act fool you. You're right, Graham. I whispered to the empty room. You shouldn't have let it fool you. I turned off the computer. I went to the kitchen and made a cup of tea. I stood by the window and watched the sun start to come up over the city. The sky was the color of a bruise, purple and yellow. I wasn't afraid anymore. The fear had burned off, leaving something harder underneath. I was going to the wedding. I was going to wear the bridesmaid dress. I was going to smile for the pictures, and I was going to burn his narrative to the ground. The law office was on the 45th floor, 3 floors above Aris Financial, which felt like a metaphor I did not have the energy to unpack. The attorney, a woman named Sarah Vance, who charged $600 an hour, sat behind a glass desk that looked like a sheet of ice. She slid a piece of paper across the ice toward me. This is the concept of constructive discharge. Lydia, she said. Her voice was dry, devoid of sympathy. If they make your working conditions intolerable because you refuse to perform an illegal act, and you quit, the law treats it as a firing. But you have to prove it was intolerable, and you have to prove the act was illegal. She leaned back, folding her hands. Right now, you have a disagreement about product strategy. That is not illegal. If you go on stage and say the product is safe when you know it is not, and then the product fails, you are not a whistleblower. You are a co-conspirator. I stared at the paper. So what do? I asked. Sarah Vance looked at me over the rim of her glasses. You document, she said. You dissent in writing, and you do not get on that stage, because once your face is next to that logo, and once your voice is on the recording saying, we trust this data, you own the liability, not your CEO. You become the shield, and shields are designed to be battered. I left her office feeling heavier than when I arrived. I called my career mentor, a retired product executive named Elaine, from a park bench 3 blocks away. Elaine listened to me for 10 minutes without interrupting. When she finally spoke, her voice was sad. It is the glass cliff. Lydia, she said, when a company knows a project is high risk or likely to fail, they often put a woman in charge of it. If it works, they say the team did it. If it fails, they say she wasn't up to the task. But why me, I asked. I am not even an executive. Because you have high trust capital, Elaine said. People believe you. You are diligent. You are ethical. If you say the data is clean, the market believes it. Your brother knows that. Your CEO knows that. They are spending your reputation to buy themselves a quarter of growth. I walked back into Aris Financial, feeling like a ghost haunting my own life. The office was buzzing with manic energy. The data core integration was launching in 4 days. Engineers were sleeping under their desks. Marketing was blowing up balloons. I had just sat down when my calendar pinged. Urgent, all hands, cue a prep. Attendees Marcus Thorne, David Lynn, Jessica Tate, Lydia Ward. I stared at the screen. Prep. I walked to the executive conference room. Marcus, the CEO, was pacing. David, the VP of Growth, was typing furiously on his laptop. Jessica, the PR lead, was arranging water bottles, Lydia Marcus said, flashing his famous, empathy-rich smile. "Come in. We have had a brainstorm." He gestured to the whiteboard. In the center, written in red marker, was the word integrity. "We are tweaking the launch narrative," Marcus said. "The market is a little jittery about privacy right now. There is a lot of noise about data brokers. We need to cut through that. We need a voice of reason." He looked at me. "We want you to lead the QA segment at the launch event," he said. "Me?" I asked. My throat felt tight. Usually David handles the product roadmap. David looked up. His eyes were cold. "David is the growth guy," Marcus said, dismissing him with a wave. "People expect him to sell. But you, Lydia, you are the conscience of the product. You are the one who killed velocity because it wasn't ready. That story is legendary internally. We want to leverage that. Leverage it." I thought, use it. "We want you to sit on stage," Marcus continued, "and tell the investors that you have personally vetted the data core integration. Tell them that if it wasn't safe, you wouldn't let it launch." I looked at David. He was smirking slightly. He knew I hadn't vetted it. He knew I had refused to sign the compliance sheet. "Marcus," I said, keeping my voice steady, "I cannot say that. I haven't finished the bias testing. We are still seeing anomalies in the zip code data." Marcus stopped pacing. The smile stayed, but the warmth evaporated. "Lydia," he said softly, "we are not asking you to lie. We are asking you to project confidence. The testing is ongoing. We know that. But we need the market to trust the intent. If I say I vetted it, I am saying the testing is done." I said, "That is a material statement of fact," Jessica chimed in. "We can script it carefully. Lydia, you can say, 'We are committed to rigorous standards.' You don't have to say, 'The testing is 100% complete.' But the implication will be that it is safe," I said, "and if it turns out to be discriminatory, I am the one who gave that assurance." Marcus walked over to the table and placed both hands on it, leaning toward me. "Lydia," he said, "you are a senior strategist. That comes with responsibility. It comes with the expectation that you support the company's vision. If you are telling me that you cannot support this launch, then we have a much bigger problem than a script. We have a question of fit. The threat hung in the room, naked and ugly. Do this," he was saying, "or you are done. I will review the script." I said, "Buying time." "Great," Marcus said, straightening up. "Team player. That is what I like to hear." I went back to my desk and stared at the wall. My hands were shaking. They were forcing me onto the stage. They were going to make me the face of the lie. My phone buzzed. An email from Celeste. Subject draft for review. 48-hour window. Attachment. Lydia_Ward_profile_v4.pdf. I opened it. The title was bold. The Quiet Architect. How Lydia Ward is Bringing Ethics to the Wild West of FinTech. I started reading. The prose was beautiful. Celeste was a gifted writer. She described my background, my education, my steely reserve, but then the tone shifted. While Aris Financial's CEO Marcus Thorne provides the charisma, sources say the true architect of the company's aggressive new data strategy is Lydia Ward. Ward, a 32-year-old strategist known for her obsessive attention to detail, has been the driving force behind the controversial but lucrative partnership with DataCore. I stopped reading. My breath hitched. The driving force. I scrolled down. Lydia is the one who sees the patterns, says one industry insider. She realized that privacy was a bottleneck, and she designed a way to bypass it while keeping the regulators happy. She is the brain behind the machine. I felt sick, physically sick. The article didn't paint me as a victim. It painted me as a mastermind, a brilliant, ruthless operator who had designed the very system I was trying to stop. If this article ran, and the DataCore deal imploded, I wouldn't just be a scapegoat, I would be the villain. I would be the Elizabeth Holmes of the story. And Celeste had written it. I grabbed my coat. I didn't care about the time. I texted Celeste. "Where are you?" She replied instantly. "The boathouse. Central Park." It was raining lightly, a cold, miserable drizzle that slicked the pavement. Celeste was sitting on a bench under the overhang of the boathouse. Watching the empty rowboats bob in the gray water, I threw the printed draft onto the bench between us. "What is this?" I asked. My voice was loud, echoing off the stone. "It is the draft," Celeste said calmly. She didn't look at the paper. She looked at me. "It is a lie," I said. "I am not the architect. I am the opposition. I have been fighting this deal for months. You know that." "Do I?" Celeste asked. "You have my text messages," I said. "You have my off-the-record statements, and I have 3 other sources who say otherwise." Celeste said. She stood up. "Sources who say you pitched this deal. Sources who say you designed the compliance workaround. Sources who say you are the one pushing Marcus to go faster." "Who?" I demanded. "Who are these sources?" Celeste looked at me. Her eyes were sad, but hard. "You know who." "Lydia?" I froze. "Graham." I whispered. Celeste didn't blink. "He calls me every night." "Lydia. He tells me how proud he is of you. He tells me how you are finally stepping up. He tells me detailed stories about how you came up with the shadow layer concept over dinner. He sends me timestamps of meetings where he claims you presented the strategy. He is lying." I said, "He is planting the evidence." "I know." Celeste said. I stared at her. I know it doesn't sound like you," she said, "but I am a journalist. Lydia, I have to report what I can verify. And right now, the verification points to you. You are the one on the org chart. You are the one whose name is on the project. And unless someone goes on the record to contradict him, his version is the only one with documentation. So you are going to print it?" I asked. "You are going to let him frame me? I am showing you the gun." "Lydia." Celeste said, "I haven't pulled the trigger yet." She stepped closer. "Why does the draft read like you own the decisions you contested?" she asked. "Because he wants me to own the fall." I said, "Exactly." Celeste said, "He is building you a statue so that when he knocks it over, it makes a louder noise." She shivered in the cold wind. "Lydia, I can't kill this story. My editor knows about it. The tip line has been buzzing for weeks. If I don't write it, someone else will. And they won't be as kind. But I can change the ending." How? I asked. "Give me something better." She said, "Give me the truth. But you have to be willing to burn it all down." "Are you willing to let the truth include your family? Are you willing to let it include Graham?" I looked at her. She was asking me to destroy her fiancé. She was asking me to ruin her wedding. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "You are marrying him." Celeste looked out at the water. She wrapped her coat tighter around herself. "I need to know," she said softly. "I need to know if I am marrying a narcissist or a sociopath. There is a difference." She turned back to me. "You have 24 hours. Lydia, prove him wrong, or I have to run the draft." I didn't go home. I went to Graham's office. It was 7 o'clock at night. Most of the staff had gone, but Graham was still there. He was always there. He worked out of a glass-walled suite in a co-working space that cost more than my rent. I walked past the empty reception desk and pushed open his door. He was on the phone, feet up on his desk, laughing, when he saw me. He didn't look surprised. He winked and held up a finger. "Yeah, Jim, she is a rock star. I will tell her. Okay, ciao." He hung up and smiled. "Lydia, to what do I owe the pleasure? Come to bask in the glow I heard Marcus is putting you on stage. That is huge. Kid, I told you, stick with me, and you will go places." I walked over to his desk. I reached into my bag and pulled out the file folder I had compiled. The timeline, the screenshots of his website, the photos of his emails to Celeste. I dropped it on his desk. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is this?" Graham asked, looking at the folder with mild amusement. "It is the truth." "Graham," I said. He opened the folder. He flipped through the first page, then the second. His smile didn't fade, but it froze. It became a mask. He saw the screenshot of the email from admin at secure-drop.net. The one where he told Celeste not to let my quiet act fool her. He stopped flipping. He closed the folder. "You hacked my email," he said. His voice was flat. "You used your dog's name as the password." I said, "You are sloppy." "Graham." He looked at me. For the first time in my life, I saw him look at me without the filter of condescension. He looked at me like I was a threat. So he said, "What are you going to do with this show, Mom? She won't understand it. She will just cry and say you are being mean." "I am going to show Celeste," I said. Graham laughed. It was a short, sharp bark. "Celeste. She is the one I am sending it to. You think she doesn't know? She knows you are sending it." I said, "She just didn't know why until I figured it out." "You are framing me." "Graham, you are setting me up to take the fall for the DataCore deal so you can keep your hands clean." Graham stood up. He walked around the desk. He was tall, looming over me. "I am not framing you." "Lydia," he said, "I am using you. There is a difference. Framing implies you are innocent. You are not innocent. You are compliant. You stayed. You took the paycheck. You nodded in the meetings. You are part of the ecosystem." He leaned against the desk, crossing his arms. "I needed credibility. Lydia, I sell air. I sell vision. People buy it because I'm charming, but they get nervous because I am untethered. They need to see something solid. That is you. You are the solid thing. You are the boring, ethical, diligent sister. When I say, 'My sister is running the risk model,' they relax. They think, 'Oh, well, if Lydia is involved, it must be safe.' So you traded on my reputation," I said. "I gave you a career," he shouted, his voice suddenly echoing off the glass walls. "Do you think you got that job because you are a genius? You got it because I played golf with Marcus and told him you were the perfect person to handle the grunt work while we built the real business." He took a breath, smoothing his tie. "And now, we are at the finish line. We are about to cash out. And you are going to ruin it because you have some misplaced sense of moral superiority. I am going to ruin it because it is fraud, Graham. And because you are trying to send me to jail." Graham stepped closer. He lowered his voice. "You want to talk about danger? Let's talk about Celeste." "Celeste," I asked. "You think she is your friend?" Graham asked, shaking his head. "Lydia, she is a predator. She collects vulnerabilities. She finds the weak spot in everyone, and she presses it until they break. That is how she wins Pulitzers." He pointed a finger at my chest. "She is bored. Lydia, she is bored with the wedding. She is bored with the society pages. She wants a tragedy. She wants a story about a family torn apart by ambition. If you give her this, if you give her me, she will eat us both alive. She will turn you into a cautionary tale about the sister who betrayed her own blood." He grabbed my shoulders. His grip was painful. "We are family. Lydia, we are the only thing that matters. Don't let her get inside your head. We can fix this. Just do the QA. Be the face. If it blows up, I will protect you. I have lawyers. I have fixers. But if you turn on me, I can't help you." I looked at him. I looked at the sweat beading on his upper lip. He was terrified. But he was also right about one thing. Celeste was using me too. She was pushing me to detonate the bomb so she could write about the explosion. I stepped back, pulling away from his hands. "I am not doing the QA. Graham." I said, "Lydia," he started, "and I am not giving this to Celeste." I said. He blinked, confused. "You aren't, no." I said, "I am keeping it, as insurance." I picked up the folder. "If you ever mention my name to a client again, Graham, if you ever try to sell my reputation to buy yourself credibility, I will release this, not to Celeste, to the SEC." Graham stared at me. He looked small. Suddenly, "Lydia." "Wait," he said. "Goodbye, Graham." I walked out of the office. My legs were trembling, but I didn't stop. I stood on the sidewalk outside his building. The rain had stopped. I realized then the terrifying shape of the trap I was in. Graham wanted to use me as a shield. Celeste wanted to use me as a sword. Both of them needed me to play a role in their narrative. Graham needed the loyal sister. Celeste needed the tragic whistleblower. If I played either role, I lost. If I protected Graham, I went to jail. If I helped Celeste, I lost my family and became a public spectacle. I had to choose a third option. I had to choose the option where I was neither a hero nor a villain, but simply a professional who refused to be used. I took out my phone. I opened my work email. It was 10 o'clock at night. I composed a new message to Marcus Thorne, David Lynn, Jessica Tate, CCHR, Sarah Vance, attorney, subject official notification regarding DataCore launch and media appearances. My thumbs hovered over the keys. This was it. This was the end of my career at Aris. Dear leadership team, regarding the request for me to lead the QA segment at the upcoming launch event, I must respectfully decline. As I have stated in previous memos, dated October 12th, October 24th, November 1st, the bias testing for the DataCore integration is incomplete. I cannot publicly certify the safety or ethical compliance of a product that has not passed our internal protocols. Furthermore, I am formally requesting that my name be removed from all external press materials, including the upcoming business standard profile. Regarding the architecture of this partnership, the strategic decisions for this integration were made at the executive level over my documented objections. Going forward, I will require written instruction for any public-facing statements you wish me to make. Regards, Lydia Ward, Senior Product Strategist. I read it once. It was cold. It was factual. It was a legal grenade. I hit send. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't relief. It was the feeling of gravity taking hold. The feeling of stepping off a ledge. The retaliation was swift and silent. When I arrived at work the next morning, my keycard didn't work. The security guard, a man I had greeted every morning for 4 years, looked down at his list and frowned. It says here your clearance is pending. Ms. Ward, he said. I waited in the lobby for 20 minutes until an HR representative came down. She didn't look me in the eye. Lydia, she said, there has been a restructuring of the product teams this morning. She handed me a visitor badge. You have been reassigned to special projects. She said, your access to the DataCore files has been revoked, as it is no longer relevant to your role. I took the badge. Special projects. It was corporate code for purgatory. It was where they put people they couldn't fire yet but wanted to force to quit. I went up to my desk. My computer access was limited. My calendar had been wiped. The QA prep meeting was gone. David walked by my office. He didn't stop. He didn't look at me. He looked through me. I was invisible. I sat there for 8 hours, staring at a blank screen. At 5 o'clock, my phone buzzed. It was Celeste. I got a call from your PR team. They say you are unavailable for follow-up questions because you are on medical leave. What did you do? Lydia, medical leave. They were telling the press I was unstable. They were laying the groundwork for Graham's narrative. I texted Celeste back. I didn't quit. I dissented. Check your email. I forwarded her the email I had sent to Marcus and David, the one where I refused to lie. I am not the architect. Celeste, I am the obstacle. Print that. I put the phone down. I had cornered myself. I had no allies at work. I had no allies in my family. I was alone in a glass box, waiting for the walls to shatter. But for the first time, the silence in my head was my own. It wasn't Graham's voice telling me to be good. It wasn't Celeste's voice telling me to be brave. It was just me, and that had to be enough. The auditorium at Aris Financial was designed to intimidate. It was a cavern of glass and brushed steel, with a stage that looked more like a pulpit than a platform. On the morning of the DataCore launch, the air inside was pressurized, vibrating with the low-frequency hum of expensive sound systems and high-stakes anxiety. I had spent the last 48 hours in the corporate equivalent of solitary confinement. My badge only worked for the elevators and the restroom. My email access was restricted to internal announcements. I sat at a desk in the Special Projects Annex, a windowless room on the second floor where the company stored old printers and employees they were hoping would resign. I hadn't resigned. I had sat there, staring at the beige wall, waiting. At 10 o'clock, the door opened. It was Jessica, the PR lead. She looked frazzled, her usual armor of hairspray and indifference showing cracks. "Lydia," she said, "get your things. You are back on the agenda." I turned my chair slowly. I declined the invitation. "Jessica." I sent a formal refusal. "I know," she said, checking her watch, "but Marcus insists. We have restructured the segment. You are not leading the QA anymore. David is doing the technical dive. We just want you for a 5-minute guest perspective." "A guest perspective?" I asked. "I work here." Jessica sighed. A sharp exhale through her nose. "It is an optics thing. Lydia, we want you to speak from the heart. Just a brief endorsement of the team's hard work. You don't have to talk about the data testing. You don't have to talk about the compliance. Just talk about the mission. Talk about how much we care about the user." She stepped closer, her voice dropping. "Look, Lydia, this is an olive branch. Marcus is giving you a chance to be part of the win. If you stay in this room while everyone else is celebrating, there is no coming back from that. You are effectively terminating yourself." I looked at her. She was offering me a lifeline that was actually a noose. If I went on stage and praised the mission, I was tacitly endorsing the product. I was the soft focus lens they put over the hard reality. "I will do it," I said. Jessica looked relieved. She didn't ask why I had changed my mind. She just wanted the problem solved. "Great. Makeup is in the green room. Be there in 20 minutes. The green room was a holding cell with better catering. There was a fruit platter that no one had touched, and a monitor showing a live feed of the auditorium filling up. I sat on a sofa, my hands folded in my lap. I was wearing a gray suit, the same one I had worn to my interview 4 years ago. It felt like armor. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Celeste. "If you speak, make it yours. If you stay silent, make that yours too." I looked at the screen. Celeste wasn't telling me what to do. She was telling me that the only power I had left was authorship. Whatever happened in the next hour, I had to be the one writing the lines. I put the phone down. On the monitor, I saw the crowd settling in. There were investors in the front rows, journalists in the middle, and employees filling the back. It was a sea of anticipation. Then, a news alert popped up on the bottom of the screen. It was a crawl from a financial news ticker, breaking Graham Ward to announce new strategic advisory board role at Aris Financial following Data Core launch. I froze. I stood up and walked to the monitor. I waited for the text to cycle back around. Graham Ward. New strategic advisory board role, following Data Core launch. He wasn't just taking credit for the past. He was securing his future. He was using this launch, the launch I knew was built on dirty data, to cement a formal position with the company. If the launch went well, Graham would be a board member. He would be my boss's boss. He would have total control over the narrative. And I would be his permanent subordinate, the sister he managed for the good of the family. And if I went out there and smiled, if I gave my heartfelt endorsement of the team, I was signing his contract for him. I felt a wave of nausea. It was a trap so perfect it was almost beautiful. If I refused to go on stage now, I would be fired for insubordination, and Graham would spin it as a mental breakdown. If I went on stage and read the script, I became his accomplice. I sat back down. My heart was hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. Ding. My phone lit up again. Not a text, an email. I picked it up. The sender was anonymous. Truth_in_fintech_77. The subject line was just FYI. I opened it. It was a forwarded email chain. The timestamps were from 20 minutes ago. From Graham Ward to Marcus Thorne, Jessica Tate. Subject RE, the Lydia problem. Marcus, don't worry about her hesitation. She just needs to feel important. Put her on stage. Call it a guest perspective. And let her talk about the heart and soul of the company. Keep her away from the metrics. We need her face up there. She is the trustworthy woman face. The investors are spooked by the privacy rumors. If they see Lydia, who looks like a librarian and talks like a nun nodding along, they will relax. She is the visual sedative. I have texted Mom and Dad. They are in the front row. She won't blow it up if her parents are watching. She is too well trained for that. Trust me, I know which buttons to push. G. I read it twice. The trustworthy woman face. Visual sedative. She is too well trained. The nausea vanished. In its place came a cold, absolute clarity. It was a sensation I had never felt before, like the temperature in the room had dropped 20 degrees, sharpening every edge. He wasn't just stealing my work. He was weaponizing my existence. He had reduced my entire career, my thousands of hours of technical labor, my sleepless nights, my fight for ethical standards. Down to a gendered prop, I was a sedative. I was a trick to make men feel comfortable while they did dangerous things, and he had brought my parents here to ensure I stayed in the cage. I stood up, I walked to the mirror, I looked at myself. I saw the woman Graham described, the gray suit, the pulled-back hair, the sensible demeanor. He thought that woman was weak. He thought her restraint was submission. He was wrong. Restraint wasn't weakness. Restraint was the dam holding back the flood, and he had just cracked the concrete. Lydia. You are up. Jessica was at the door. She held a microphone. Remember, she said, smoothing my collar, short and sweet. Talk about the passion. Talk about the family feel of the team. I took the microphone. It was heavy in my hand. I walked down the hallway toward the stage wings. The sound of the CEO's voice grew louder. Marcus was finishing his keynote. And that is why we believe the 360 view is not just a product. It is a promise that we see you, a promise that we understand you, and to tell you more about the heart behind this technology. I want to invite up one of our longest-serving strategists, a woman who embodies the integrity of Aris Financial. Please welcome Lydia Ward. The applause was polite, rippling through the dark room. I stepped out from the wings. The lights were blinding. For a moment, I couldn't see anything. I walked to the center of the stage, my heels clicking on the hard floor. I looked out into the void. As my eyes adjusted, faces began to resolve. I saw Marcus standing to the side, clapping, his smile wide and encouraging. I saw David in the front row, arms crossed, watching me like a hawk. And then I saw them, in the second row, dead center. My mother, my father. They were dressed up. My mother was wearing her Sunday church outfit. My father was wearing a tie. They were beaming. My father gave me a thumbs up. My mother had a hand over her heart. They looked so proud. They looked like they were watching their daughter finally get the recognition she deserved. And sitting right next to them was Graham. He wasn't clapping. He was leaning back, one arm draped over the back of my mother's chair. He was smiling at me. It was a proprietary smile. A smile that said, I made you. I own this moment. He tapped his watch subtly. Time to perform. Lydia. I looked at him. I looked at the man who had sold my childhood obedience as a corporate asset. I raised the microphone. The room went quiet. Thank you. Marcus, I said. My voice was steady. It didn't shake. It sounded deeper than usual, resonant in the large space. I have been asked to speak today about the integrity of the team and the heart of this project. I paused. I saw Marcus nod, encouraging me. Integrity is an interesting word. I continued. In engineering, integrity refers to the structural soundness of a system. It means that the system can withstand pressure. It means that the foundation is solid. I took a step forward, moving out of the spotlight's center. Closer to the audience, in finance, integrity means something else. It means transparency. It means that what we sell is exactly what we deliver. It means that we do not hide risk in the fine print. I looked directly at the investors in the front row. I have worked as the senior product strategist here for 4 years. My job is to assess risk. My job is to ensure that when we say a product is safe, it is actually safe, not just profitable, safe. I saw David uncross his arms. He sat up straighter. For the past 6 months, I have led the bias testing for the data core integration. I heard a rustle in the room. This wasn't the script. I was getting too technical. And because I believe in the integrity of this company, and because I believe in the obligation we have to our users. I feel it is important to be precise about where we stand today. I took a breath. I did not sign the certification for this launch. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. The data models we are using today have not passed the internal bias audits required by our governance protocols. The zip code weighing in the algorithm is currently showing a disparity that violates our internal ethical standards. Lydia. Marcus started, stepping forward. His microphone was off, but his hiss was audible. I kept talking. I didn't look at him. I looked at Graham. There is a narrative that this product is ready. I said. There is a narrative that the strategy was designed to bypass these concerns safely. That narrative is false. The strategy was designed to prioritize speed over verification. I saw my mother's hand drop from her heart. She looked confused. She looked at Graham. Graham wasn't smiling anymore. He was staring at me, his face pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and fury. I cannot ethically endorse this partnership, I said, and I cannot allow my name, or my silence, to be used as a seal of approval for a risk I did not underwrite. I looked at the crowd. I believe in Aris Financial. I believe in the engineers who built this platform. But I believe that true leadership is the willingness to say stop when the safety of the user is compromised, even if it costs us a quarter of growth, even if it is inconvenient. I lowered the microphone slightly. I am not a guest perspective. I said, I am the risk officer, and my assessment is that we are not ready. I stopped speaking. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. The room was frozen in a tableau of horror. Marcus's smile was a rictus of panic. David looked like he was about to vault onto the stage. Then, I turned. I placed the microphone gently on the podium. I didn't run. I didn't cry. I walked off the stage with the same measured, professional pace I had used to walk onto it. As I reached the wings, I looked back one last time. I saw my parents, huddled together, looking small and terrified. I saw Graham, frantically typing on his phone, his face slick with sweat, and at the very back of the room, standing near the exit, I saw Celeste. She was holding her phone up. She wasn't looking at the stage. She was looking at me. She wasn't smiling, but she nodded. A single, sharp dip of her chin. She had the recording. I walked into the darkness of the backstage corridor. My legs felt like jelly, but my head was clear. I had detonated the bomb. I had blown up the launch. I had likely destroyed my career in the industry, but as I pushed open the heavy exit door and stepped out into the blinding afternoon sun of the parking lot, I realized something. I wasn't the trustworthy woman face anymore. I was the trouble, and for the first time in 32 years, the story belonged to me. Thank you for listening to this story. It has been a journey through the quiet, suffocating pressure of family expectations and corporate maneuvering. I hope you enjoyed the slow burn and the final explosion. I would love to know where you are listening from. Please leave a comment below with your city or country. It is always fascinating to see how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this narrative, please consider subscribing to Revenge Stories for more tales of justice, betrayal, and the moments when the quiet ones finally speak up. Share your thoughts in the comments. Do you think Lydia made the right choice? Was the cost worth the truth? Until next time.